Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Amanda.
And we're your hosts.
We're a traveling couple and digital nomads taking you on our adventures as we explore locations, destinations, and careers.
Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the World Wanderers podcast. Today on the podcast, we are super excited to be joined by Mitko and Sarah Karshovski.
Yes, and if you are an attentive listener to the podcast, you will remember that Mitko, we interviewed him all the way back in summer of 2019, and we talked about Bulgaria, where Mitko is originally from, and why it can be a great, incredible spot for nomads or travelers. And we've actually had the opportunity to meet in person. We spent some time together in Puerto Vallarta. We actually recorded an interview from Mitko's show, That Remote Life, which you can check out on his podcast feed or on YouTube. And we were excited to sit down with Mitko and his wife, Sarah, to talk about their stories as travelers and as nomads, how they found out about the digital nomad life, what made them excited about it, and what their journey was like going from working normal jobs at home to making that leap into traveling and working full time. We talk about lots of different places around the world, including Bulgaria, Asia, and Mexico, and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always really fun for us to get to actually meet people that we've interviewed on the show in person. So it's been really cool over the last couple of months getting to hang out with Mitko and Sarah in person. And then to be able to do this podcast interview in our living room in Mexico was super, super fun. So hopefully you can enjoy this podcast episode kind of like you were there with us hanging out. And just before we get into the episode, we just wanted to remind you about the World Wanderers Insider. The Insider Show is a bonus show for our community on Patreon that's all about teaching you how to become a digital nomad. So if at the end of this episode, you're feeling really inspired by Mitko and Sarah's journey and inspired by Ryan and I's journey, then definitely head on over to the Insider and check out all the episodes we have there with ourselves, as well as amazing guests who are working and traveling around the world. So you can get access to that at patreon.com/The World Wanderers. All right, let's get into the episode. Here's Mitko and Sarah.
All right, Mitko, Sarah, thanks for joining us here in our apartment and on our podcast.
Thanks for having us. We're excited.
Yeah, we're stoked to be here.
And it's Mitko's second time. For everyone listening, we'll have the link in the show notes. But I think it was 2018 we had you on to talk about your travel story and a bit about Bulgaria as well. We still haven't made it to Bulgaria.
Unfortunately.
We had plans to go this year.
This year, like 2021?
2020.
Last year. We had plans to go last year, and then the pandemic happened. We didn't get there.
Well, hopefully soon.
Yeah, and this time around is a lot more fun because we're together, like in person, as opposed to I remember last time that we did the interview, it was like my first time doing an audio only interview. So like I couldn't see you guys, and this time not only can I see you guys, but we're in person.
It's kind of funny because obviously we're traveling so much, but the place we have the worst Wi-Fi was actually that house in Canmore in Alberta. It had really bad Wi-Fi. And so we were like, okay, audio only interviews, let's keep it stable. But I figured a good place to start would be just how your nomad journey started. So you guys have been kind of digital nomads for a while now. How did you kind of get that idea of like, this is something we want to do and start doing it together?
So I'll start that one off. Back in 2016, I think it was, I had just graduated college, and Mitko had found, I think, the term digital nomad on Google or something, and had heard of this lifestyle of traveling and working online. And I remember he was talking to me about it, and I was raised in a very traditional Catholic conservative home that was get a job, go to college, get a career. And he started talking about this to me, and I'm like, that's not real. You can't do that. It sounds like a scam. Like I don't think that's a real thing. And he just kept like bringing it up to me, and I'm like, okay, Mitko, and I, went on my merry way. And finally he was like, just get on Upwork and like apply for one remote job. And I'm like, okay, fine. So like to humor him and to get him to shut up for a little bit, I was like, I'll apply for a job. And I got my first like consistent job on Upwork, and I think I was making like $400 a month, but it was like a consistent job, and I was just so excited to like finally see the beginning of something happening. And we ended up going to Bulgaria that summer, I think, for the first time. Such a bad idea. We were making like no money, and we were like, oh, we should just move to Bulgaria. Like, we've made it. Everything is good.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I remember you were earning like $400 a month, and I had just started making like, I wasn't making that much more. Like, I was maybe making $1,000 a month, and I was like, babe, we made it. Let's go. I quit my job the next day. Like, you know, and we just hit the road. And now looking back at it, I'm like, that was so, like, that could have gone so badly.
And exactly how my parents reacted when, you know, they said they're very traditional Catholic conservative. And I was like, I'm making $400 a month and I'm moving to Bulgaria with my boyfriend. And they were like, oh, okay. And they were none too happy with that. So that was kind of the rocky beginning of everything.
Yeah, for me, it was like, you know, so last time that I was on the podcast, we talked about Bulgaria, and I was born in Bulgaria. And when I immigrated to the US, I was 10. And like the way that I describe this is, in the US, I was always the Bulgarian kid. Like, that's how I was known. And then when I'd go back to Bulgaria, I'd be like the American kid. So nowhere was I just like the kid that like fit in. And so for me growing up, I almost never really felt quite at home anywhere. But at the same time, I had this experience in living two very distinct lives and living in two very different places. So I just couldn't ever imagine myself, like, just this idea of saying, hey, I'm going to plant my flag here and I'm going to buy a house. I'm going to have this white picket fence and I'm never going to like leave. Just for whatever reason, didn't really make sense. And we did this trip in 2016 for like 3 weeks. We went to a whole bunch of different cities. And I just remember saving up for such a long time to be able to do that. And then through that 3-week trip, I just remember watching, mind you, that already small little bit of savings that we were going to travel with just dwindling the entire time. And I just was like, why, like, how nice would it be if I didn't have to go back to my lifeguarding job to make money and I could just like make money online? And so I think that's where it kind of started. And I found the 4-hour work week, and then, you know, heard about like the digital nomad term. And then, like I always say, that was like the Pandora's box. Because you find digital nomad and then you put that into Google and like all this stuff pops up. So
That's so cool to hear. I feel like we can relate to so many different aspects of that, like both finding it and parents being like, what the heck is this? And then also setting out for the nomad journey, not making very much money. I think we were both probably making like maybe $1,000 a month. I think I made like $12,000 the first year of nomad life, like for the whole year, which is like really not enough money to live off of. But when you're in Thailand, it gets you like a little bit further. So I'm curious a little bit, like you guys went to Bulgaria on that first trip. It's like you're making like $1,400 collectively per month. This could go like one of two ways. It could end up with, you know, 5 years later, you're in Mexico living the dream, or being like, what the heck have we done? We're going home. Obviously, we know where the story ends, but maybe tell us like how that first little bit went and what made you want to continue.
Yeah, I think it just opened the doors to it. Like, we were constantly like, I remember, I think I got another, when we were in Bulgaria, I think I got another like longer term job while we were there, a better paying job. And it just slowly, it made me want to build up my Upwork profile and just keep going with it a little bit. So I think it just opened the door and made us want to see more.
I think the important thing there to note is that we went to Bulgaria and my family still like owns an apartment in Bulgaria. So even though we're only making $1,400 a month, we had a free place to stay. And it was this like very soft launch, right? Like, it's not like we went somewhere that we had never heard of before. We didn't know anything. We went to Bulgaria where I had been and where I was very familiar with. And so even though we were digital nomads, we went somewhere, it was like a soft launch essentially. And it wasn't like all roses and rainbows. I mean, that year, so 2017, we left. It was January of 2017 when I quit my job. And then I think we left for Bulgaria in like April. And at the end of that year, I actually like remember I went through a really tough period because like the work that I was working on kind of like ran out. And all of a sudden, I was again at zero, having to figure it out again. And I remember like I had to go back for a little bit to my lifeguarding job until things picked up again. So it's not like as if we just like got started and then it was all fine and dandy from then on. Like, there was definitely like little steps back. But I think one of the things that was like a benefit for us was like there were no other options. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like it's not like that we didn't have other options, but that we weren't really even like playing with other options. You know, it was kind of like, hey, this is what we're going to figure out and we're going to move forward. And even though we kind of like fell down or stumbled across the way, like we just kept working on it and like figured it out until it reached a point where it was sustainable.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear. I feel like that's sort of where we've been at too, hey?
Yeah, yeah. And then did you guys have kind of like a bucket list of places you wanted to go or things you wanted to see in terms of like the travel side of digital nomad life?
So I think the first, I don't even know how many years, we based wherever we were going based on where the cheapest flight was going. So it's just like, how do we get to Europe? And it was a fun game that I think allowed us to see a lot of places that we wouldn't have initially. You know, people go to Paris, go to all the like bucket list destinations, and we flew into not smaller cities, but some smaller cities that I don't think we would have normally visited, because one of our kind of tricks for getting over to Europe on a cheaper budget was flying into wherever was cheapest in Europe and then taking a Ryanair flight into Varna or wherever our final destination was. So in the beginning, we did not. We just kind of looked at our budget and, saw where we wanted to go. And I think now we're doing a little bit more of that.
Yeah, I think for me, like, I definitely wanted to go to Southeast Asia quite a bit just because, like, I got so interested in, like, remote work. I mean, like, obviously I have a podcast about remote work and the digital nomad lifestyle. So, like, I went head first into that whole topic. And so for me going to Southeast Asia, I really wanted to do that in order to kind of visit the Mecca of it all, go to Chiang Mai, go to Bangkok, go to Bali, all those places. And also, like, I was the first person in my family to have ever gone to Southeast Asia. And so for me, that was a bit of a bucket list. But since then, to be honest, like, I don't know if I have a list of places I want to go to. I think I have more like list of activities I'd like to do. And then finding like the place that is most conducive to that activity, I think is kind of how my bucket list works. But also, like, you're traveling and then you hear your friends talk about Puerto Vallarta, and I was like, I've never thought about going to Puerto Vallarta, but okay, now it's high up on the list to the point where we're going to go there next. So I think it just always changes,
Yeah, 100%. I'm curious, you said that you would just take like the cheapest flight. Like, where are some of the random destinations that took you?
I think the first trip that we took, so we did that trip in 2016, like three week long trip. I think we did 9 different cities in 5 countries in 3 weeks, which is a lot. And it's not really random, but we ended up in, I can never pronounce it, but Cologne, Germany.
Yeah, in English it's Cologne.
Yeah.
But then if you
it's
talk
like
to a German, they're like Köln.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
It's like
I can't do it. I can't do it. Somebody's
try again?
Yeah. So I think we found during that trip, we found a flight from Köln to Madrid for $11 on Ryanair.
Wow.
And during that time it was even before the $400 a month phase. So it was like money was tight at that time. So I think that was like, they're in Bergamo, actually. We ended up in Bergamo, Italy. It's kind of near Milan. And we had never planned on going there, but it was just this really cute like mountain town in Italy that we ended up in. And it's one of my top favorite places that we've been. So that was cool to like discover it that way.
Yeah, I think Bergamo, if I'm not mistaken, is a Ryanair hub in Europe. So there's lots of flights that go through Bergamo, even though like Bergamo has one of those like small regional airports, like the bigger airports in like Milan, for example, but all of the budget airlines go through Bergamo. And we just had like a layover in Bergamo. And I just remember going like, all right, like this is some weird small town in Italy that I've never heard of, and like really liked it. So, which is unfortunate because I actually think like the COVID pandemic this year in Italy kind of like hit Bergamo really hard, which is quite sad. But that was like one of our favorite places that we went.
Yeah, that's really cool. When we backpacked together the first time in 2011, so like a decade ago, we did the same thing. Like, where's the cheapest flight we can get? And it was via Iceland. And so it was like back before Iceland became as popular as it is now. Like, we'd never thought Iceland. Like, it was never on our bucket list. It was kind of like, what is there even to do in Iceland? We
Which
have
is
no
crazy
idea.
now because it's like the place to go.
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, 100%. And so we got these like really cheap flights with like a 3-day layover over in Reykjavik, which was so cool. So that's benefited us too. I feel like we should just do that again. Even though we're not like backpackers, we should just do that stuff. Like just book to the cheapest place to
One
get
of the
us
things
somewhere.
I've always wanted to do as like a nomad is like just go to an airport and then just book a flight somewhere.
Yeah.
Completely random. It's one of those things of like, you kind of think like, hey, I have this like complete freedom and flexibility to live wherever I want. but then you kind of end up boxing yourself in a little bit.
Well, I think that comes down to like, I think that is like a big problem with like, not just being a digital nomad, but I think you have this dream of like what life is going to look like when you get to that place. And then you do get to that place and then you almost like don't take part into the things that like got you to want to do that first, right? So like there's a lot of people who, for example, like want to become digital nomads because they want to like travel all the time or go to this one specific location, but then they get so like busy in the, you know, working online or building a business or whatever it is that they kind of like forget the reason that got them interested in that topic in the first place.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely for us. We had like kind of a similar experience when we were doing this big backpacking trip of South America and just like absolutely loving life, but kind of seeing that bank account drain and being like, oh, what if we didn't have to do this? It would be perfect. It would be like amazing. But then, yeah, when we started out as nomads, kind of finding that like it was something different where like it doesn't have that same freedom of just traveling, but you can also kind of get into that like unless you're actually like doing a good job of your work, you don't really get to enjoy either side of it.
Yeah.
Have you guys found that like the actual reality of digital nomad life has kind of lived up to your expectations or what you thought before?
One of my first jobs on Upwork was like transcribing video. And I was like, I can transcribe video from the beach. Oh my gosh, I could do this forever. This is amazing. You know, getting paid like, I think I was getting on Upwork like $7 an hour for this. I was like, this is amazing. It's so magical. And now obviously looking back, I'm like, oh, you know, it's totally makes sense.
But there's something about that, like, yeah, the first time you're getting paid to do something and maybe you don't have like hours to do it in, or you get to be like flexible and change things up of like, oh, I'm not going to work on Wednesday. I'm going to the beach on Tuesday. And getting to move around from place to place as well.
And I think there is something about like, you know, it's not like that was wrong and now we're doing it right. But something that I've been asking myself more recently is like, how can I bring more of that excitement and that joy back into this? And to like, remember that like, I get to do this. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, like, you know, like you said, like maybe I'm going to take Wednesday off and we'll go down to the beach. You know, like you almost fall into this routine and this hamster wheel all over again of like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, work from X to X. You know what I mean? And you kind of forget that like you have the opportunity to say like, screw it, I'm going to go down to the pool, you know, this afternoon. And, you know, I think there's like a happy balance of the two of like, you need to get work done and you need to do the thing that pays the bills. But at the same time, don't forget that you're doing this lifestyle so that you can have these fun experiences.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously like human nature to get accustomed to stuff, but you kind of want to fight against that a little bit, like to be grateful for the things you have. But I think it is also important because it's like, I think some people get into travel or get into like digital nomad thinking it's going to like, you know, be the best thing ever in the world. But like there is something about like traveling from city to city to city that does kind of make you realize that like there are more important things in life than seeing places, right?
For sure.
And it's funny because I think like Tim Ferriss wrote about this in the 4-Hour Workweek, and I went back and I reread it. I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago. And I was like, there's like all these problems that I've been having that I've been trying to figure out. And Tim Ferriss wrote about them in like 2008 and had them like figured out. And it's, you know, he talks about like going through seasons in your work, right? So like one season, like 3-4 months, you're really going to be focused on work and you're going to be cranking out work all the time. But then the next month, you know, maybe you only work a couple hours a day and you go and you travel more and you kind of speed travel and you get to relive that backpacker vibe a little bit more. And it's this sort of idea of like, there's not like, you can't really do both at the same time, but you have the power to like take a month in which you don't work as much, you know, so. But
on that note, I do like to say, because I feel like a lot of digital nomad talk revolves around entrepreneurs and people that have their own business. And then you have people like me. I can't necessarily do that as much because I do have it's not a 9-to-5, but I do have a full-time job. And luckily it's incredibly flexible. I've been there for 4 years, but I don't have as much freedom to do that. So there is like, you know,
right.
It's interesting, like comparing the journeys of the entrepreneurial digital nomads and the employee digital nomads. Cause
yeah, we went from like, you know, we were saying like not making very much money. Soon after that, Ryan actually took on a full-time job. And I guess it wasn't necessarily Monday to Friday, 9-to-5, but it was kind of like Monday to Friday, 9-to-5. Like there was enough work to be working in that time. And then it was kind of also like at any time during those hours, somebody might like send you a message on Slack. And there's kind of an expectation that within like an hour or two, you're going to get back to them and probably like do the task that was asked of you. And I think that was like an interesting transition in our journey, kind of like learning these different ways that we can work. And it's sort of interesting because even I don't have a full-time job, but it's like part of what I do with my business is I work with various clients, which means like there is a responsibility during certain times to be doing things or like having calls. And it was like for me, it was getting so crazy where I'd have things every single day of the week. And I'm like, okay, I need like at least some semblance of a weekend. Like if it's not Saturday, Sunday, it needs to be different days. So it's kind of interesting, like just the waves you can kind of go through with this lifestyle.
Well, and I think, it comes down to like the evolution of work a little bit, right? Like in the very beginning, digital nomads and like remote workers had to fit their life and their work around what was accepted in the offices, right? So like if your clients were like companies that had employees coming in and they had like strict office hours, you needed to be available for those office hours, right? Like you needed to like, even though you were remote, like you needed to work 9 to 5 still. And I think the interesting thing with COVID is I think it's in many ways the beginning of the end of that, where I think now, even though asynchronous work is something that's been floating around for like a decade now as a concept and is something that people and companies aspire to, I think it's far more going to become the norm now. And we're going to have the ability to have more of this control of our days that was sold as this benefit of digital nomadism, but wasn't the reality, if that makes sense. And I think that we're slowly moving into the direction of it becoming the reality. So,
yeah. And so kind of speaking to that, like what does your kind of day-to-day life look like? How do you guys mix in travel? What does it look like when you're not back in the States?
For me, day to day, I like to wake up really early and like I get out of bed and like go sit at the computer before I even get coffee. Like it's just when my brain is the freshest. I feel like that's, you usually start your mornings a little bit slower, Mitko, but I like to like just get as much work done as I can like early on in the day. I usually work until about 2, 3, just depends. Again, like you said, there's different seasons of like having more work, less work, but you're usually until the afternoon. And then we try to explore a little bit, walk around, and I feel like more of our exploring is reserved for the weekends. So I feel like we do have a pretty like normal work week, which I prefer just for routines and everything. But yeah.
Yeah, for me, I think like one of the things that I'm trying to do a better job of is like adjusting my daily routine based on the location that I'm in. So is there something in the location that we're going to that I can fit my schedule around, right? So like we were in Sayulita, just like an hour outside of Puerto Vallarta where we are now, for a few weekends. And I was just thinking like, what would my daily routine look like if I lived here? And I think it would be like, all right, well, I'm going to wake up in the morning, I'm going to go surfing for 2 hours, and then I'm going to get my job started, right? But right now, like, yeah, I can't do this thing where I just roll out of bed and I start working, because like for the first hour and a half, my brain is like not functioning, or it's like, it's just getting up to gear. So for me, I usually wake up, I, like journal a little bit or something, I have my first cup of coffee, and then I try to work for about 3 hours, and then I take a little break, and then I'll work again for about 3 hours. And if I can be really focused in those 2-3 hour chunks, then I usually find that ends up being like a really productive day. But then, like you kind of need to like look at your week. So for example, this Thursday, we're going up to Guanajuato, right? So I know that when we're in Guanajuato for a few days, I'm probably not going to be able to work as much. So I'm really packing a ton of work now and working way more than I normally would every day, knowing that, very soon I'm going to have 3-4 days where I'm going to be, I'm only going to work a couple hours and kind of take a bigger break. So
I feel like we've been doing that a lot more, is working really heavy days in the first few days of the week and then allowing for some flexibility. Cause I do have a full-time job, but I do have a lot of flexibility with it. And it's kind of a getting your tasks done based job. So I think we've been doing that a lot more, is having heavier work days. And sometimes that means working until 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night, which we're fine with, and we just communicate that to each other in advance, and then allowing for some more flexibility for like weekend trips or just enjoying a Friday. And I think that's been, I've been really liking that we've been doing that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I love, Mitko, you said like the evolution of work. And I feel like that really resonates with me. Like I do feel like looking at things like place to place and also just whatever kind of season of life you're in. Cause I do feel like, especially when you're working kind of more for yourself or doing contractor things or freelancer things, like sometimes work will come in and then work will leave. Like you'll finish a project or something. And I mean, this even happens with full-time jobs. Like sometimes seasons are busier. And if you can kind of like ride that out, I feel like it becomes a lot more natural as opposed to trying to like fight against it with like a day-to-day routine. But yeah, I think our lives are very much similar to you guys in terms of like, we kind of pack more of our activities between like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and try to live more like normal life. And part of that was just feeling like, I feel like as humans, we need some semblance of routine. Like we're creatures of habit. We like that. And as much as like we can push against it, it feels nice to have a routine even when you're in a place like Mexico, because then you don't feel like you're so far from home. And you can still do things like go to the gym and, you know, those like day-to-day things.
Yeah, it's definitely like, I feel myself craving routine because we don't have like you said, the comforts of a house to go to or like a dog to go home to, or like those comforts that I find myself missing a lot sometimes. And I feel like a routine, like having, I talked about this the other day, having a routine that's really sacred to you, but allows for flexibility depending on where you are or depending on, you know, what season your life you're in, but have just things that are like non-negotiable routine parts of your routine that just bring you comfort, because we don't have, you know, a lot of us don't have those same comforts that, you know, people living in a house would, you know, so.
Yeah. And being able to give yourself permission to like enjoy your travels without thinking about your work, and permission to focus on work and not worry about if you're missing something as well.
For sure.
I also think that unfortunately, like schedule and routine have gotten so attached to like office and cubicle life that they've become demonized along with it, right? So like everybody talks about like, I don't want to work in a 9 to 5. I don't want to have to go to the cubicle, and I just want to like live without a plan and just sort of like roll around and like just, you know, go wherever like the wind blows me. And like, that's great. Like good for you. But I almost like, I think having a schedule and having a plan and having some form of routine gives you freedom as long as you're the person that's in charge of that, right?
For
like
sure.
Nobody wants to have a boss that tells them like, if you're here at 9:05 instead of 9, like you suck, right? So like nobody wants that. But if you can be the person to call the shots and create your plan, sticking to that plan is usually where I find the most freedom and the most enjoyment out of life comes from.
Yeah. I remember when we first started, we were just not really like doing a schedule, kind of as that like rebellion against it. And then we were like, no, we need to take days off. So let's take Tuesday, Wednesday off, just as we really like stick it to the man. Like we're making our weekend Tuesday, Wednesday. And so we were like, why are we working Saturday, Sunday? That's dumb.
Right.
And eventually we've grown out of that phase.
It's amazing.
But I will say that is one of the nice things, right? Is like if you can in the middle of the week from time to time throw in like a little like Wednesdays off this week, like that's awesome. You know what I mean? Like if you normally work Monday through Friday, even as a digital nomad, and then every couple of weeks you're like, I'm taking this Wednesday off. Like it is really great to be able to do that and like, you know, like just kind of like stick it to the man, but like you plan for it, you know?
So what has your journey been like? So you started in Bulgaria and then obviously we're in Mexico now. What's kind of the travel's been like in between those 2 points?
So I think we've fallen into a pattern in the last few years, maybe 3 or 4 years, of going to a warm like a warm tropical location, which has either been Southeast Asia or Mexico, for our new favorite term called Jan-Feb, which is a super nerdy term that we came up for January and February.
It's not nerdy, make it happen. Jan-Feb. Hashtag
not nerdy.
Jan-Feb.
I think I'm adopting Jan-Feb.
You should. It's there.
It's very self-explanatory.
Yet I still felt the need to explain it.
What months are those? December?
Exactly.
So I'll see you in November for Jan-Feb.
For Jan-Feb. So we've done, I think, Southeast Asia and Mexico for Jan-Feb. And then we've gone home for the spring, to the States for the spring, just to, you know, see family and friends and whatnot. And then, usually we go to Europe in the summer and base ourselves out of Bulgaria and then travel from Bulgaria because obviously it's easier when you have a home base to stay in and then travel within there. And then we've taken a few trips to Spain in the fall. I was an au pair in Spain back in 2016. That's where we started our kind of 3-week long journey back then. So we have my little family that's there. So we go visit them. We've gone every year, I think, to go visit them.
Yeah. And if not, we've maybe missed like one.
Yeah. So that's kind of the pattern that we've fallen into over the last few years.
Yeah. It's almost like we did the flag theory thing without me knowing what the flag theory thing was. Like we kind of started doing that before I knew what it was. But yeah, I think we kind of just discovered like a pattern that emerged naturally of doing a warm place beginning of the year and then going to Europe, mainly Bulgaria for the summer, basing ourselves out of there. And then like in the early fall, we like to go somewhere else outside of Bulgaria. Like when the summer season kind of ends in Varna and it stops being as pleasant as it normally is. Like we tend to go to Budapest or Barcelona, and then we come back to the US for November and December and the holidays, and then just repeat all over again. And
that has been like a non-negotiable for me is I love Christmas and Thanksgiving and all that. So like we need to be home from Thanksgiving until Christmas. It's important to me. And I just that time of year is just,
and it's nice to be with family.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
So, I mean, they're all right.
Yeah.
No, I think it's nice to have that like sort of non-negotiable time built in. For us, it hasn't been like around the holiday season because it's so freaking cold where we're from at that point. But we have other friends that it's like Christmas is non-negotiable. That's always when they go home, and they'll just make like a month or two out of it where they like go to their favorite restaurant, see their friends and family. For us, it's been more like summers. Like our summers are like, we've never missed a summer in Canada the whole time we've been alive.
No.
So I think that's really cool to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like, I don't know, like it's become like a bit of a pattern, but I think it works really well where I wouldn't be mad about spending every summer, at least in the foreseeable future, in Varna because it just is so pleasant, and like taking small trips around there and then being back in the US, seeing family November, December. And I think we're just still kind of like looking for that perfect Jan-Feb location. And then we'll have like this nice little triangle. You know what I mean? Like,
I heard Mexico is pretty great.
you know what? For me now, like surfing has been the thing, like where has the good surfing? And I think that will kind of, for me at least, determine like where I would like to be for
Just for you.
Jan-Feb.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying is like, I'm saying where I would like to be, and then you say where you'd like to be, and we'll find a place that has, you know, the happy.
And we'll find a place that has surfing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I've heard Mexico is pretty good. I'll just keep saying it. I feel like that's like our Jan Feb. So if you want to align our Jan Febs, I feel like that'd be pretty cool.
Jam Feb together.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you kind of outlined there, like Varna being a big one, the time at home. What do you guys kind of look for in a place that like makes you kind of think like, oh, we'd really like being here for a while?
I can tell you a place. Maybe Mitko, you could help explain why. I don't know why, but we've just like really fallen in love with Budapest. And especially in the fall, like I remember when we were in, I think it was one of our first digital nomad, like whatever outings. We went to Budapest for like a week, and it was a super budget trip. And we got there, and, you know, again, like we had almost no money, and we said, oh my gosh, one day we're going to live in Budapest for a month in October. And it was like this big dream. And like we did it I think it was last year 2019.
2 years ago.
2019. And we did it. And it was just this like beautiful moment of like, you know, you guys have both been there when you're like, you have no money and you're just dreaming of like, oh, one day I'm going to be able to afford a $700 a month apartment. And it's going to be like, you know, this magical moment. And I don't know, it makes me like emotional just talking about it. Cause it was just, I remember like flying in and we saw the colors of the trees, and I was like, you know, I don't know. It wasn't a financial thing. It was just like, we set out to do this years ago, and we finally, it felt very homey to me, and it felt very like, so I kind of went off on a rant there, but Budapest has just felt like very homey to both of us. So maybe you can explain why. But.
For me, like I look for a community. So like I want to go someplace where either there's like other nomads or like there's an entrepreneurial community there. Like usually if there's a good co-working space that's popular, they'll have a community around them that you can plug yourself in right away. And you can meet other people, it's always really fun to go and like co-work together. Like we were doing a Volta, in Merida, like that's always great. So that's one thing that I look for. The second thing that I look for, it's kind of become a joke with the Jan-Feb thing. It's kind of similar is I call it the fizz. Like there's some places that give me the fizz, and I can't explain the fizz. The
Is it
fizz
like indigestion?
it's like a pleasant.
Okay, it's a good fizz.
But it's like I don't know. Like there's just some places, and like maybe you've had those before, where you just get there and you're like, yes, like this just feels right in some way. And Budapest is one of those places where it's just like I just feel happy there, and I just feel. And Hungary has problems like every other country, but there are some places that I'm just like. This feels, I like being here. I feel nice here. I feel comfortable here. Barcelona for me felt very similarly, where Barcelona is one of these amazing cities where I could walk the streets of Barcelona all day and be like, this is sweet. You know what I mean? So I think that there's like, I can't describe the fizz. It's just, does the city give me the fizz? Yes or no? It's a check mark. And
luckily we've been pretty synced up in that. So it's been good. We haven't been, I don't know if there's been any big differences in us, but I feel like we're both pretty much on the same page with that, which has been really nice. I get the fizz from Budapest too, I guess.
I was going to say, you've aligned your fizz.
We've aligned our fizzes.
We've actually found that kind of as well. Like we haven't been too many places where one of us has really liked it and one of us has really disliked it.
Yeah, somebody was picking our brain on, I think it was like, they interviewed us for their show and they're like, how do you decide on places? And we're like, we usually just have a conversation and then we go there and it's like, we know what we both like. So we usually like do pretty well picking things, but it is sort of like, we're usually pretty aligned on like, yeah, this was cool, but like maybe not again. Or like, this was the fizz. This gave me the fizz. Like, we love this. And I feel like I can relate to that because I feel like Mexico City like still gives me that feeling.
Do we have I feel like we might have a mismatch on one place, but I can't think of what it is.
I know what it is.
What is it?
I love the rain and I love the cloudy, gloomy weather. So I love Ireland so much. I love the rain. Like I want to just go have a farm in Ireland and be with a lot of sheep and just like be there for a long time. And Mitko does not do well with the gray skies and the gloom. He's a sunshine guy. So I think that's the biggest. Yeah. We did that list of places that we would live for 6 months or longer. Remember that?
Yeah.
And that was one of my top 5. And you said no.
I did not say no, but I was like, this is going to be a problem because I could not spend prolonged amounts of time in Ireland. So yeah, maybe Ireland is that place where and not that I don't like Ireland. Ireland's great, but I feel like if I'm in Ireland for longer than a couple weeks, I don't know. I'm just going to like lose it.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way with that. I'm not a big cloudy sky, rainy day gal. Like once in a while, it's nice. You can put a sweater on, curl up with a book and like a little blanket. But after like a day, I'm like, no, I want some sunshine. I can't believe you just said
the sweater word to me in Mexico. I haven't worn a sweater in 3 months. I am like crying.
You know what's funny about that is the other day, like maybe 2 or 3 days ago, it was kind of cloudy here. And I was just in the worst mood. And I was like, why am I in such a bad mood? Like I slept well, like everything's fine. I was like, have I just become so like I'm so sensitive to it now for being in Mexico for such a long time that this one cloudy day like ruined my mood. Yeah. I'm about to have a really tough time in Detroit in the week. You know?
That's actually really amazing because the day after that, I hadn't left the house until about 4:00 and I thought it was going to be chilly again. So I wore jeans and a black shirt and I had to show up to Ryan and Amanda's apartment to bring them something. And I was just like literal droplets of sweat falling from my face because I wore jeans in Mexico on a 90-degree day.
I was like, why on earth are you wearing jeans right now?
They were like, are you okay? And I'm like, no, I need to go. So that was, I remember that day.
And so you mentioned having a list of places you'd live longer than 6 months. I'd be curious, what is kind of on the top of that list?
I remember I think it was, I don't know how many was it. I had Ireland, Asheville, North Carolina. I love Asheville.
Would you go somewhere specific in Ireland?
Not in Dublin. I don't dislike Dublin, but I don't care about Dublin. But like in the middle of the country somewhere, just like surrounded by green.
Where did we go in Ireland that we both liked it? Was it Galway?
Galway was fine. It was that Kilkearney place.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a small town, but yeah. So to get back to Ryan's question, I think it was Asheville, Ireland, Budapest, Barcelona. I don't remember any other ones.
Yeah, for me, like 6 months, because that's like, there's a lot of places that I'll go for a little bit, but to spend 6 months or more, I would say Budapest, Barcelona. I think I've never been here yet, but so I think I could spend a prolonged amount of time in Lisbon, Portugal, because we've been to Porto and I actually didn't like Porto a lot at first. And like about 3 weeks and I was like, oh, okay, I can dig this. And I think like Lisbon, not having been there, but knowing enough about it, I think could be one of those places.
Lisbon has potential fizz.
Yeah, Lisbon has potential
I feel like we
fizz.
know enough people who like we trust and share a common interest with that like spend a ton of time there that it makes me think we'd really like it there.
Yeah, because we've only been there as backpackers like a decade ago. And we really liked it then. Like we spent, I think like a week there or something and it was awesome.
Yeah.
And then the other place like this is like a pretty obvious one, but Varna, where we do spend like 6 months almost every year. So yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. That's a great list. I feel like there's some places that we haven't been that we might need to add to our list. And then also some similar places. So that's really cool. And so obviously over the last year, life's been very weird for those of us who don't have like full-time homes in one place. Where were you guys in March 2020?
So when in March 2020, we were in Iceland when the travel ban and everything first got called. And, at first I think we got to Iceland on March 1st and it was, I don't want to say a joke, but everyone was kind of making it like poking fun at, COVID and everything. And it slowly obviously started to get more serious because we were there for 2 weeks. So towards the end of it, I think the travel ban got called on March 13th and we were scheduled to fly out of Iceland on March 15th. So it was, those 2 days were very chaotic to say the least. We were on a group trip with our friends that run group trips called Life Nomading. And we were there with, I think, 6 other people. Mm-hmm. Flights were getting canceled left and right out of Iceland because there were only 4 airports open in the United States. And it was just really crazy. So that happened. We came back to Cincinnati and quarantined for a couple weeks. And then we made a quick decision and rented an apartment for a year, which is we've been together almost 7 years now. And that was our very first long-term lease that we have ever signed as a couple. So so that was a new thing for us this last year. And that's the quick version.
Yeah, I think that was like a really stressful period of time, as it was for everyone listening, I'm sure, because we were in Iceland, we had plans for that year, and then we had to figure out, so our flights didn't get canceled to the US, but we had to figure out like, we're outside of the country, where do we go? We didn't want to go back to we didn't want to bunk with my parents because like, what if we had it? And then if you remember at the very beginning, it was like, are we dying from this thing? Like, is this like every horror movie? Or nobody really knew what was happening. And so we got an Airbnb for 2 weeks. And during those 2 weeks where we were kind of like quarantining, we just, spoke with people. Luckily Sarah's dad is a doctor. One of my best friends is a doctor. And so we got to talk with them, get an educated opinion on what's going on. And based on that, we made the decision to get a long-term apartment because we just didn't see a reality in which we were going to be able to run our regular life. And so in all honesty, Cincinnati, it was actually kind of nice to be stationed in Cincinnati again. And we got to enjoy a summer there, even though it was a weird summer. It was nice to be home for a summer and enjoy being around our family and to kind of rediscover the city that we've known for a long time, but haven't spent that much time in recently. So
yeah, it did bring up I feel like there's this part of me that still craves having an apartment to go back to all the time and having some like consistency in my life like that. So it did kind of scratch that itch for me a little bit. We got to furnish an apartment and enjoy it for a little bit and just have, I don't know, like a place to call home for a little bit, which I have, like part of you misses, during, being a digital nomad, part of you misses that. So it's kind of nice to like scratch that itch a little bit and get to see family, because we don't get to do that a lot. So yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Definitely like a good opportunity to, because I think we spent longer than we normally do and weren't doing as much and got to see a ton of people. And
I don't remember the last time we spent 7 months in Canada consecutively. I think, we were home for a while and we spent like a lot of time with family and not as much time with friends just because of the rules and regulations. But our parents were like in our little bubble and stuff like that, which was great. We saw them more than we've seen probably collectively both of our parents in the last like 2-3 years, I would imagine, just in 2020. And then I feel like very much I can relate to what you said, Sarah, like kind of, we're like, oh, maybe we should like a house here and we can, set it up as an Airbnb when we want to leave. And it is nice to have that. I found towards the end of the time we were there, I was like, okay, I think I'm like ready to leave now. Like I've like, scratch this itch and now I'm ready to leave now. I know you guys obviously ended up leaving. What kind of spurred the decision to like come to Mexico and leave again? What was that all about?
So I think it started back in November, and I've been notorious in the past for saying like, I want an apartment, I want a house, like, and then we get an apartment or whatever. And then 2 months in, I'm like, okay, I want to travel again after we've furnished everything and bought everything. And
to give you an idea of this, in 2019, Sarah for the first time was like, Mitko, I think I want like an apartment. Like, let's get an apartment. I don't really want to travel for a little bit. And so I was like, all right, like, let's do it. Like, it will be a different adventure. We got in a long-term apartment, and Sarah about 3 months in was like, I think I want to go. And I was like, we just finished furnishing this place. And like, we're like, all right, let's put this thing up for like, rent. So
that kind of happened again, but not entirely, because we couldn't just like get up and go. But I think we signed our lease in like beginning of April. And then in November, I actually had COVID, tested positive for COVID over Thanksgiving. And that was kind of, I don't want to call it a check mark of, oh, we can go travel now, but it kind of gave us a little bit more comfort and like, okay, it's been done with or whatever. And, it just kind of got us thinking like, can we start traveling sooner than we anticipated? And got in touch with our friend Nathan, and we were like, oh, we're thinking about coming down to Merida. It's in the same time zone. And we only had in our apartment in Cincinnati, we only had a fire escape. That was our only like outdoor space. And we're like, why wouldn't we go spend the same amount in Merida for, to have a private pool and to like be able to go outside? And if we're going to be quarantining or staying inside more often, why wouldn't we be doing that in Mexico? So I think that kind of, spurred the decision to leave on February 1st to go down to Mexico, come down to Mexico.
Well, we're glad you did.
No. Oh, I know.
And Mexico is so good and so fun. So that's been really great.
In terms of what we were talking about in like getting a place, that's actually Sarah and I like having this experience with COVID. We decided that we've been talking about it before, but definitely after our experience with staying in Cincinnati during COVID, we decided to purchase a home in Cincinnati. And our plan is to get a duplex so that we can rent one unit out long term and hopefully have that cover the mortgage, and then keep one unit for ourselves that, like you said, we can rent out on Airbnb when we're not there, and just have this place to kind of know that we can go back to it, and it not being our parents or friends or something like that is something that we're really looking forward to doing. And I think in the future, that's kind of our plan to do, is like, okay, what are these places that we keep going back to over and over and over again, and that we enjoy staying in, and like, how can we build like little home bases there that we always know we can go back to and then travel from there if we want to.
Yeah, I really love that idea.
Yeah, that's definitely something we've talked about as well.
And so you guys are here now, but heading back to the States, and then your plans to go back to Bulgaria for the summer, right?
Yeah, so we are heading back to the States in a few days. We've been gone about 3 months now. So we're heading back for about 5 weeks, and then we're getting vaccinated, and then depending on the vaccination schedule and our second dose, we will be heading back to Bulgaria as soon as we can after that. And we have a ton of flight credit to use, so we're really hoping to mix that in there some way. So there are a lot of variables at play, but we'll just see where it goes.
Take a zigzag trip around.
Well, there was one, I think we have some on tap, and there was like a 36-hour flight, but we could get the flight covered. So it's like, do you want to really take a 36-hour flight, or do you want to just pay for a different one? So we're just kind of like, I don't like making decisions, so I'm just like putting it off until the last second. I'll be like, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back to Bulgaria because we were just talking about this before we hit record. I'm starting to get really hungry for Bulgarian food, and I'm just like really big time looking forward to that. So
Yeah.
Awesome.
And you guys are planning to spend like 6 months in Bulgaria?
Yeah, so we're married now, so I can spend more than 3 months in Bulgaria, which I'm really excited about. We haven't been able to do that before. I've had like a 3-month limit. So I think we're going to go there until September, and then October we'll probably spend in Budapest again, and then go somewhere until Thanksgiving. We like having like a little bit of flexibility. I'm sure you guys too like to have a little bit of flexibility, a general plan, and then some room for, making plans last minute. So
Yeah, absolutely.
And especially with this year, like even though things are starting to feel like they're on their way to starting to get back to normal, you need to be like extra flexible this year because like I don't know what could happen,
Yeah.
So that's our tentative plan, but who knows?
I love it. And so why don't we wrap up by just tell listeners a little bit about what both of you guys do and then where we can find both of you online.
So I do social media marketing and build some sales funnels. I don't have a website or anything. I just have an Instagram account, but I'm at Life of Sarah Jane. So that's pretty simple, but
And she's famous on TikTok, so
I am
you
not.
can find her on
I am
TikTok.
not famous on TikTok.
I was going to say, she's pretty great on Instagram.
Yeah,
so
you've
should
got some
definitely-
awesome reels, awesome content. You do an
thanks,
awesome job
guys.
like documenting the sunsets and stuff here in PV.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Right. PV, if you're listening, you can hire Sarah to be your
TikTok gal.
yeah. But I have a podcast called That Remote Life, which you guys were just on. So if anybody who's listening to this wants to hear about your experience with getting a Mexican residency, coming over to That Remote Life, and you can hear Amanda and Ryan talk about that. And I have a website there, and I run a community for online entrepreneurs that if anybody's interested, you can find out more about it just by visiting the website. So
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking the time. I think it's time for us to go get some tacos.
Yeah, it's been great getting to know you guys the past few months.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you want more, make sure to check out The World Wanderers Insider, available on Patreon at patreon.com/theworldwanderers.
For show notes, head over to theworldwanderers.com. Find us on social media at The World Wanderers Podcast and join the private Facebook community at World Wanderers, a community for travelers.
You can always get in touch with us at info@theworldwanderers.com. And if you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps us find new listeners.
See you next time.